Hope everybody, I hope
Watch what you
everyone
say.
is doing well. And with just some sad news, I guess you've all heard by now that Lester Charlock passed away. Les will be very sorely missed with our group as well as with the Stanford community. Yeah, very sad. Let's just have a moment of silence and. Okay. Does anybody want to say anything about Les?
I'd just like to say, hey, Joe, I'd just like to say what a great neighbor he was. He got me into the men's group originally, and he was the historian. He was like the mayor of the Stonebrook Association here. And anything you needed, anything you wanted to know historically, you went to Lester. So we would see him walking his dog with his wife, Elaine, and Harry every morning. So we really miss him. And I think of him every day.
Thank you, Ron. And thank you for
Joe,
keeping us.
I'd like to add a few words if I might.
Yeah, David, please. And then after that, bring us up to speed if you can on Jack.
Sure, I'll do that as well. Yeah, so we moved to Stamford about 14 and a half years ago, and no surprise, who was one of the first people that really welcomed us and brought us into the community? Of course, it was Lester. We had an immediate bond, and all of you know that among his many passions, the Jewish Historical Society was right near the top. He was one of the founding members of that organization 36 years ago. He was the second president, and I could give you a laundry list of the things he did. But Lester was also the kind of guy that when he asked you to do something, I mean, you did it. And there was no way of saying no anyway. And so Elisa and I have been heavily involved in the Jewish Historical Society ever since. Elisa now president. But the reason we got involved was strictly because of Lester. And his current project, remembering the family store that's being made into the documentary that we previewed a few weeks ago, is on track for being completed, and hopefully we'll do a showing in the fall. Of course, we need to see what else happens. The thing that amazed me about Lester, though, was the breadth and expanse of his influence within the community. Yeah, successful businessman with Robin's curtain shop, multiple locations. But I could give you a laundry list of all the organizations that he was involved with and influential with. And of course, with Harry and their weekly or more often visits to care facilities throughout the area. I really consider Lester a brother, if you will, and truly am going to miss him. Our hearts go out to the family, but we have the memories of Lester that will sustain all of us. I did speak to Marilyn Austin and in fact Jack earlier this morning. He is home. He was discharged from the hospital Sunday, was doing pretty well. Yesterday he ended up back in the hospital with AFib, which has been a recurrent problem. They got it stabilized and sent him home about 4:30 last night. I asked Jack how he's doing. He said, well, pretty weak, but hanging in there. And he said he's probably going to, he has an appointment with a cardiologist coming up. They're probably going to put a Holter monitor on him just to see what's going on with the heart, the AFib. So that's the update on Jack.
Thank you, Dave.
Joe, I'd like to say a few words about Lester. Alan,
Yeah, go ahead.
I've known Lester perhaps my entire life. My dad had a store in Stamford, the Lantern Jewelers, and he, as you know, Lester had a store in town also. He used to send me pictures with cars in them so I could date the cars so he could date the pictures. And one of the pictures was a Packard from the 30s, and there was an architect in town, Paul Sternbach, who was a noted a Packard man. And I said that's a 1938 Packard, and chances are it belongs to Paul Sternbach. It wasn't 10 minutes later, he sends me a photograph of a sign in the second floor window and it's Paul Sternbach's office, architects, Paul Sternbach. I mean, it took him 10 minutes to dig that out and send it to me. Just an encyclopedia of what went on in Stamford. Anytime he ran across a picture of Atlantic Jewelers, my family store, he sent it to me. I'm going to miss him. He was just a wonderful, wonderful man. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Okay, I see Phil, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I met Lester on a trip to New Haven Museums, an SMAS trip. And when I got on the bus, there was a vacant seat next to him. I didn't know who he was. We became very good, close friends on that trip, going up and coming back. I was privileged to be asked by the family to officiate at his funeral. And of course, only the family were present. There would have been hundreds of people who would come because of all of the things that had been said by David and also my next door neighbor, Alan. I looked out that way because I could possibly wave to him. I'd like to mention that today is the 100th birthday of Murph Weingrad, who was also an extraordinary individual. He's played an important part in the life of Stamford and its citizens. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Phil. Joe Racanello.
Yeah, I would just like to say a couple of things about Lester. As everyone knows, he worked for Rovin's curtain shop over the years, and Rovin's, of course, was a very well, it was a terrific business, and they were really the best in curtains. I actually went to high school with Fred Rovin, who lived around the corner from me. But, you know, I met Lester, you know, at the men's group there, and I wanted to relate a positive story about my father-in-law and my mother-in-law. They lived in the same complex, you know, where Lester was living. And when they moved in, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, Lester got to know them, and he actually assisted in curtains and, you know, putting up the curtain rods, and he gave my in-laws a lot of helpful suggestions, you know, about curtains. And I can tell you that my mother-in-law and father-in-law really appreciated Lester's input, and it was a very gracious thing to do. And I just wanted to relate that positive story that his efforts were appreciated by my in-laws.
Thank you, Joe. Arcady, Art.
Yes, I of course, newcomer, know Lester only since I started membership at SMAS, but I can tell you that it's a big inspiration for me because it's inspired the person, you know, to be active in community, in society, to have interests and to contribute, you know. So in his 90s, he was still very active, you know, developing history of Stamford, of Jewish community of Stamford. So I, on my part, do not know him for a long time, but still, its memory is great for me. inspiration from them. It's a great example how one should live in life. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Thank you, Art. Okay.
Looks like Earl wants to say something. You're mute.
Oh,
Earl, you're mute.
I'm not mute now. Who wants to say something?
Earl, he's
Earl King wants to say something, but
Yeah.
he's mute right now.
there he goes.
I first met Les in Stanford High School, where we're both seniors in the class of 47. He was a very smart young fellow, and we always had a little competition. He was from East Side, and I was from Springdale. Later on in life, when I my early days at Fidelity Bank, Lester would bring over the deposits from Rovens, and I'd see him almost every day in the morning as I was a teller, and he gave me the money there. Later on, we served together on the reunion for the class of 47, which we had several reunion dinners and parties. And after that, I've known him through the senior men's, where he was very helpful, and I really admired him because he took such a great interest in the old Stamford.
Thank you, Earl. Okay. Next, I don't know, all you golfers, is Howie or, well, Brian is there. Here. Brian, you want to unmute?
I just want to tell everyone that I did send out notices for all golfers. So if anybody is a golfer and did not get a notice, you want to email me at brianmcdermott34@gmail.com. I think I got you all.
Okay. And you're collecting monies now and,
Yes, it's all in the email.
okay.
Because I'm not golfing, I didn't really look at it, but I had a comment someone made to me that the price wasn't in the email.
Yes, it was.
Okay, they missed it.
$45.
They missed it then. Okay.
All right.
Howie wants to talk.
I'd want everyone to know that everybody's having their own cart. It's going to be social distancing. There is no luncheon served because we don't feel at this point that it's safe enough at that point. But it's going to be a fun outing. I see some guys here that I haven't heard from yet. I'm hoping I'll hear from them. You know who you are. So please join us. We'll even take Lloyd Contracts Eagle. But it's a Monday, October 5th. It's 7:45. The prizes are still going to be given, whether you come in first, second, third, or one of the skill contests. Brian will be the judge, so he's already won all three. But we're looking forward to you guys. So give us a sign up. We'd really like to have a good turnout. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Howie. Brian, unless you guys have anything else to add?
Yeah, Joe,
Yeah.
has anyone heard from Jim McEwen? I haven't been able to reach him. I go into voicemail every time I call. He had what he described as a mini stroke a few weeks ago. Does anybody have any update?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right, before we get into today's program, does anybody have anything they want to bring up? You got 30 seconds to raise, 10 seconds to raise your hand, blue hand. Okay.
Brian, did Brian, you raise your hand?
Yes, I
Brian,
did.
yeah.
I was wondering if anyone knew what was going on with the dump. Who made the decision to like open the dump? Katrina might get dumped only 2 days a week. Does anyone know where that decision came from?
I don't think there's anything been, last I heard in the paper, they were just gonna keep it open on a Saturday and close it during the week, and who knows?
Joe,
I don't know if that's a play on trying to get funding to it, or but yes, I haven't heard anything other than what we read in the paper.
Well, another thing the paper suggested is that they are laying off operations people, and that that was the reason they were closing the dump. They were moving those people out of there, is what I heard from somebody else.
Yeah, well, that was they were going to lay off a bunch of people from operations, the solid handling group, and the dump was going to go, and limited operation, and they would still somebody had suggested that they do something with the garbage collection and all, but as of the last article, garbage collection and recycling was still continuing.
Joe, this is Art Gelston.
Yeah.
They were asking, where did the decision come from? When the mayor announced it, he said that he had to cut in that area because their union, and the city seems to have umpteen different unions for all the different departments, refused to agree to the lower cost medical and to, I guess I'll call it pay give.
Yeah.
And he said that will follow for all the departments whose unions did not agree. And theirs was the first. And so he cut it back to Saturday. Just yesterday afternoon, an email came out from Dan Calalori, the supervisor, saying that they're going to be open on Tuesdays as well now from 7 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon.
Okay. Good enough. All right, Bill Munko.
Yes, I was just going to mention that I just got an email last night about the Tuesday. So it'll be a Tuesday and a Saturday, which makes a little more sense.
Okay. Ed, Roloff.
Yeah, there's apparently going to be a meeting with a Zoom meeting with the representatives for people to discuss their opinions and about keeping it open only, originally 1 day a week and apparently now 2 days. So there is going to be one. Unfortunately, I don't know when it is. I just got a brief thing on the neighborhood group that talked about it, and they wanted you to contact your representatives in advance of the meeting.
Thanks, Ed. Lloyd?
This is a further manifestation of the old concept, is that when you have to curtail government services to the public, you only use those people who are serving the public directly as way of getting rid of or furloughing. Now, for instance, the mayor hired 6 people last year for his office staff. Now,
Okay,
one word
Lloyd, excuse me, we don't want to get into, discussion on that, okay? The situation is what it is right now, and the unions are not conceding, so the same thing happened with the teachers and all. Let's not get into, who hired who and what, and I'm sorry to cut you short on that, but, I don't want to get into that, go into that on this discussion.
No politics.
Okay, Arcady. Art. unmute yourself. Art?
Okay, I unmute myself.
Yeah.
So my question is, I don't know rules. So if union doesn't agree with the terms of proposal, which say mayor outlined to them, the whole department of this union can be fired or laid off? How does it work?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's dramatic.
Well, I mean, you know, the situation is that the city's budget didn't cut. We didn't get any tax increases, and where are they going to get the money from? So,
I see.
And the proposal was if they agreed to the concessions, they wouldn't get laid off. So the departments and the unions, there's like 7 or 8 different unions in the city, the auto workers, the teachers and all. Some voted to accept them, and those groups, those employees that are part of that union are not getting laid off.
I see. Okay, thank you, John.
All right, let's get into the program, and then later, if we have time, then we can get into an open discussion. And Lloyd, I'm sorry to cut you on that, but you know, let's see if we have time later. Okay, Dick, Steve, the show is yours.
Can everybody hear it?
Yeah.
No,
I'm not hearing anything, Steve.
no sound.
No sound.
No sound here.
No sound.
That's the.
Still no sound.
When you share the video, make sure you click the bottom, the click thing at the bottom that says computer audio.
Or if anyone in the group can lip read, they can perhaps fill us in.
Why that?
Good day. Welcome to Boston National Historical Park. I'm Ranger Patrick, one of the National Park Rangers here. Currently, we're inside the Bunker Hill Museum. Across from us is the Bunker Hill Monument, the place where the battle was fought on 17 June 1775, a battle which became known as the Battle of Bunker Hill, one of the most important battles in American military history. We'll discuss in these next few videos why this battle was so important, how it changed what was at stake in this conflict, the American Revolutionary War, but also why it was fought here on the peninsula north of Boston, and how the unique geography of colonial Boston played a role in the outcome of this battle. Boston had become a city under military occupation beginning in May of 1774. This was the second military occupation of Boston. This occupation was due to the Boston Tea Party, which occurred in December of 1773. British troops had now come into Boston to enforce a series of laws known collectively as the Coercive or Intolerable Acts, meant to punish both Boston and Massachusetts economically and politically. The last royal governor was Lieutenant General Thomas Gage. He would seek a military solution to a political problem, but he understood the challenges he faced. He began to send troops into the countryside looking to confiscate colonial stockpiles of munitions. The first such foray was on the 1st of September 1774, an event known as the Powder Alarm. British troops confiscated colonial stocks of gunpowder in what's now Somerville, Massachusetts. The lack of gunpowder would play a major role in the Battle of Bunker Hill fought the next year. Other military expeditions, however, were not successful, mostly due to intelligence failures. The last and perhaps most ambitious began on the 18th of April, 1775. British troops crossed from Boston, crossing the Charles River, heading towards Concord, Massachusetts, 20 miles to the west of Boston. However, before they could reach their destination, 2 riders exited Boston, including Paul Revere, under the direction of Joseph Warren, one of the key leaders of the Sons of Liberty and the Provincial Congress. British troops would open fire on dispersing colonists on the Lexington Green on the 19th of April, 1775. A few more miles away at Concord, again, without order, they would fire upon armed colonists. But this time, colonists returned fire. This return of fire became known as the shot heard around the world. Now under fire, British troops would leave Concord, heading back towards the safety of Boston, fighting the whole way. Because bridges had been cut to prevent them from crossing from the north side of the Charles River to the south side, back to Boston, they came through here, the Charlestown Peninsula, on the heights overlooking Boston. They understood what a good defensive position this was and began to establish defenses which they abandoned to bring all troops back into Boston. Boston was now a town under siege. British troops trapped on the inside, colonists on the outside. At the time of the battle, the British garrison was about 6,000 men. Colonists outnumbered them almost 3 to 1. Geographically, Boston was one of the worst places in the world to bring an army of occupation due to its isolation. Surrounded by water on 3 sides, connected to the mainland by a very tiny strip of land. Now, Britain's military strength was traditionally in its navy, but the water around Boston was very shallow and subject to tidal fluctuation, for which the British did not have very accurate maps. That meant that their major warships would have great difficulty navigating around Boston. Boston was also dominated by 3 major hilltops around the town. The heights of Charlestown, where we are now, the heights of Roxbury, south of Boston, and the heights of Dorchester, also south of Boston. At the beginning of the siege, colonists had fortified the heights of Roxbury. Imagine that was the cork keeping the British troops bottlenecked on the inside. They would have to break this bottleneck. Over the next 2 months, from April to June of 1775, both sides had to figure out what was at stake. What were they fighting for? For the colonists, independence was not yet their goal. The Declaration of Independence was still a full year away. They were hoping to maintain their political autonomy, but not seeking separation from the Empire of Great Britain. Perhaps naively, they thought that King George III would be sympathetic to their cause, and that their problem was truly with Parliament. For the British troops in Boston, their problems were more immediate: how to break this siege. They decided the best way to do so was an amphibious attack on the undefended heights of Dorchester. By doing so, they could then drive away with infantry the colonists from Roxbury. If one could control 2 of these 3 hilltops encircling Boston, they could control the town itself. The British plan was for the 18th of June, 1775. However, again, they were subject to intelligence failures, and the colonists realized the British were making a plan to break out of Boston to the south. They decided to disrupt those plans by fortifying the heights of Charlestown to the north. Under the direction of Artemus Ward and Joseph Warren, colonists will prepare on the evening of the 16th of June, 1775, to march from Cambridge to Charlestown and seize the undefended hilltops north of the town, thus threatening the British from the north and disrupting their plans. setting the stage for a major battle, the first major battle of this war, the next day, the Battle of Bunker Hill, fought on 17 June, 1775.
We have
Okay.
two coming up.
Yeah, I'll bring up the second one now. Give me a second here. Okay.
Good day, folks. Ranger Patrick here with you again on the heights of Charlestown, continuing our discussion about the Battle of Bunker Hill. Right now, in fact, we're at Breed's Hill, a spot 62 feet above sea level here in Charlestown. It's here the colonists established their initial fortifications on midnight, the 17th of June, 1775. It's also where the climax of the fighting occurred several hours later. The 4 acres here preserved by the National Park Service is in fact the only part of the battlefield left. The colonial forces who had been directed to seize the heights of Charlestown fell under the command of Colonel William Prescott, a veteran already of 2 wars. Most of the older men were veterans of either the French and Indian War or King George's War before that. But the majority of troops from Connecticut, New Hampshire, Massachusetts had no combat experience prior to this engagement.
At the neck of Charlestown, these troops were joined by more colonists commanded by General Israel Putnam, and together they proceeded across the Charlestown ridgeline. Colonel Prescott decided to fortify a lower point on the ridgeline, a subset of the higher ground known to some locals as Breed's Hill. Without major siege weapons, the colonists would have to be as close as possible to Boston to actually threaten the British positions.
The colonists arrived here at midnight. They picked up shovels, pickaxes. They began to work on an earthen fortification referred to as a redoubt. Nothing fancy, raised earth, 150 feet by 130 feet, encompassing where the monument is today. This cornerstone marks the southeast corner of those defenses.
Although the colonists had the initiative, the British had the firepower. From both their Copp's Hill Battery and from 7 major warships on the Charles River, the barrage would have been terrifying to the average colonist, the majority of whom were young men who had never been in combat before. The first colonist killed, Asa Pollard, was decapitated by a cannonball. Many colonists deserted the battlefield. To give courage to his remaining men, Colonel Prescott allegedly got up on the ramparts of the redoubt and said,
"Hit me if you can!"
Fortunately, the barrage had little effect on the colonial fortifications, as the guns could not elevate high enough to hit the redoubt directly. Prescott did realize his position was exposed and sent for reinforcements and extended his defenses to the north, constructing a 100-yard breastwork to protect his flank, making use of a rail fence and a makeshift stone wall for protection. Included in the reinforcements was none other than Major General Joseph Warren. However, Warren, knowing more about medicine and politics than warcraft, declined a leadership position, intending to fight as a basic infantryman, saying,
"I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood."
Eventually, somewhere between 1,200 and 4,000 armed colonists were present in Charlestown. Half on the front lines, the other half on a fallback position on higher ground further to the west. Throughout the day, British regulars mustered in Boston. Overall battle command fell under Major General William Howe, who would eventually take over as Commander-in-Chief from Thomas Gage. On approximately 28 barges, 2,300 British troops, a third of their overall garrison, crossed the inner part of Boston Harbor to coincide with the rising tide. These tidal conditions and the time it took to organize their men for battle they were not expecting accounts for the delay in the British attack. The first of 3 British assaults on the colonists began at 3:30 p.m., more than 15 hours after the colonists arrived in Charlestown. This attack was led by light infantry down the banks of the Mystic River. Facing them were New Hampshire troops led by Colonel John Stark. From behind a stone wall, Stark instructed his men not to fire until the British troops were within approximately 30 yards. The light infantry were mowed down like grass. While this was happening, another attack was directed toward the center of the colonial lines, then a raid behind a rail fence. This attack was led by General Howe himself, who stated,
"I shall not desire one of you to go one step further than where I go myself at your head."
His troops were aligned in long, linear formations, which was normally conducted to maximize firepower to the front. However, this formation made the British advance very slow, each soldier carrying up to 127 pounds worth of gear. Using the rail fence as defilade, the colonists opened fire. Colonists intentionally targeted British officers. By the end of the day, 92 officers were killed or wounded, roughly a quarter of all British officer losses for the entire war. In only a few hours, the small unit leadership of the British Army was wiped out. At this point, the first wave of British reinforcements arrived in Charlestown, largely Marines. Because of harassing fire from colonists within the town, which had been abandoned by its civilians, British warships used hot shot, superheated cannonballs, to set the town ablaze. By the end of the siege, Charlestown would be completely destroyed. It was clear after their diffused attacks, the British needed to focus on the key terrain feature of Charlestown, the heights and the redoubt itself.
No!
Within the redoubt, looking at the fires reducing Charlestown, the colonists realized only they stood between the British and a similar fate for their own homes. However, they were running critically low on gunpowder. This would be the deciding factor in continued resistance. At 4:30 p.m., the British began their third and final assault. The redoubt was now isolated in a sea of British troops, who could now attack from the north, east, and south simultaneously. At this point, there were only about 120 colonists left within the redoubt, and many had no powder at all, reduced to hurling rocks at the British troops who chanted, "Fight, conquer, or die." All the more intimidating were the 14-inch steel bayonets the British troops had affixed to their muskets. their psychological edge for close quarters combat. American colonists, by and large, lacked bayonets, and so turned their muskets around to use them as clubs, as well as knives, tomahawks, and even their bare fists. But it was a hopeless effort, and the colonists began to withdraw.
One of the last individuals out of the redoubt was Joseph Warren himself, covering the retreat of the other colonists. Close to where we are right now, he was shot below the left eye and killed instantaneously. However, his sacrifice and that of others allowed the vast majority of colonists to escape out of Charlestown back towards Cambridge and safety. The British pressed their attack to the apex of Bunker Hill, stopping at 5:30 in the evening, ending this 2-hour battle in a victory for Great Britain. They had achieved their objectives, seizing one of the 3 major hilltops encircling Boston, but a victory that had come with an immense cost. 40% casualties of the attacking force, 226 men killed outright, an additional 828 wounded, of whom 250 would later die of their wounds. Although British Lieutenant John Waller called this a complete victory, the Army was not prepared psychologically or militarily to absorb this sort of punishment. Colonial losses were less, but still sobering. About 140 men killed, more than 300 wounded, and 30 captured. They had lost the hill and one of their key leaders, Joseph Warren, but they had proved they were willing to fight for what they believed. As the sun set on the bloody hills of Charlestown, both sides tended to the wounded. The battle for the fate of Boston and for America was far from over.
Okay. That was a little bit of history that I don't know if we all were aware of what happened and how it happened. So, Dick Fisher, thank you for suggesting that. And I know you have a couple of other videos that are similar vein about the national parks and the history behind the national, some of these sites, and looking forward to maybe seeing a few of them during the remainder of the summer. Anybody have any comments on this? Yeah.
Yes, I have. They said it, one of the first guys to be killed, that a cannonball took his head off. Holy shamoly, what a shock. Jeez.
That was one of them luck shots.
I'm telling you.
He was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Absolutely right. And he, you know, it's a cannonball. You can't duck.
Okay. Anybody else have anything?
John wants to say something.
Well, when you're talking about cannonballs, the most famous Revolutionary War incident was at the Battle of Monmouth when Molly Pitcher, whatever her real name was, and it's disputed, a cannonball went between her legs and carried her skirt and petticoat off. And her comment was, if I had been a man, it might have caused more damage.
Joe's on the phone. Does anybody else have any commentary that they want to make, whether it's about this? I hate to say how it relates to what's going on today when we see people storming city halls and government buildings. And
At least we won't have to worry about cannonballs.
It's tear gas.
yeah, Joe.
I grew up in Massachusetts, just south of Boston. For you guys, this may be new news or new history. I was in public schools all through my upbringing. Just want to let you know.
Anybody else have anything they want to say, discuss on any topic?
James.
Yeah, Jerry.
Unfortunately, today, the schools aren't teaching history the way we learned it back in the day, like Joel said. And I just wonder if we could muster up enough people today to shove off the yoke of people like King George. I don't think we could.
Unfortunately, personally, I think you're correct. I don't know whether the generation today has that kind of fortitude, or even I hate to say it, the fortitude that many of us saw in our lifetime, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, even in the Middle East. I mean, it's out of the news, but that's still going on, and I don't know what the younger generation thinks of it anymore. Go on. Yeah, Jerry. Unmute yourself.
Okay.
Last night I saw in the news that they were interviewing one of the protesters out in Portland. And this young woman said, we have to abolish the nature of our culture and our government in the United States. That's what it's all about.
Not to be political, but I think the Black Lives Matter group has gotten off track of what they started out to be. But if you look at the background of the people that founded it, they have a background in Marxism. You can read that on their website.
Say that again. They have a background of what?
In Marxism, communism.
Oh.
Sounds like we're getting political.
That's everything I've heard about.
I mean, I'm
Sounds
just going
like
off what that's what their website says.
Yeah.
About their background.
That's everything.
And I think I think it's gotten off its original purpose.
I don't think it ever had an original purpose other than Marxism.
Okay, guys, we're getting political now.
Well,
yeah, I have something.
Yeah.
Tonight's opening night for the Yankees.
Yep.
All right. All right.
Did that help make a left turn here?
Good segue. I'm not sure it was a segue. It was a good change of direction.
That's what I meant.
But what are they doing for people? Are they putting in cardboard images or what?
That was so clever, because I watched there was a game from Texas last night. The stands were empty. They are feeding in the sounds of the crowd, which does help. But the idea that the Yankees had the cutouts, genius, absolutely genius. That was great.
Yeah. Now if they could get the cutouts to buy hot dogs, they'd be better off.
I think in Korea they use sex dolls, if I recall.
I'm sorry?
I think in Korea, for the baseball games, one team put sex dolls in the stands.
Oh, gee.
That might get the ratings up.
Somebody on Facebook posted something, and this is semi political or little. They took a picture of the cutouts from the back, and I guess it's white foam board, and they said, "Gee, the cutouts are racist. They're all white." leave it to somebody on Facebook.
Well, one of the cleverest that I saw on Facebook was a picture of President Trump and Kim Jong-un, and they switched the hair.
Did it look better on either one of them?
No, it still looked terrible, but they switched. It was just very funny.
All right, we got a couple of minutes left. Next week, does somebody want to come up and volunteer to lead a discussion, open discussion, or have anything that they want to have a video shown on? Looking for suggestions. Because remember, this is a group endeavor for these summer meetings, and you're the guys that are gonna suggest something, and
So can I make an announcement?
go ahead.
Well, the book group is meeting on August 5th, reading On Desperate Ground. I just finished reading it and returned my copy to the Darien Library. If anybody's interested in joining the book group, this would be an ideal time. So it's an excellent book about the events leading up to that great battle of the Chongjin Reservoir, or the Chosin Reservoir, as they say in Japanese.
So who wants to join the book group?
Well, if there's anybody here who's sort of they've never been in the book group before, but this would be an ideal time to join because it's an excellent book that we're discussing.
Okay.
Copy of it.
Yeah, it's going to be on the 5th at 1:30 or 12:30. Excuse me.
Can I make a suggestion, Dick, Harper, and get a email out through Steve, send an email to Steve, and he'll distribute it to all the members that if they think they might be interested or just want to see what the group is doing and what goes on in the discussions, they can, since it's on Zoom, they can join the Zoom book group meeting.
That's a good idea, Joe. I'll do that.
Great. Yeah, I think if anybody wants to join it, that they can very easily sit in on a meeting.
If you guys haven't seen it today, the Senior Center is sponsoring a grab-and-go hot dog dash at the Church of the Archangels on Bedford Street. It's a drive up, get a hot dog, and off you go.
Okay.
Supposed to register in advance.
Yeah. There's a website, but I don't know how closely, though. I think that's just more to get an idea. The idea is to get people out safely.
And I guess just an item of information was in yesterday's paper. They have no COVID patients at Stamford Hospital as of yesterday. So that's good news. But the protocols are still in place. Visiting one visitor per day from 1 to 5. So, fortunately, Carol was admitted yesterday between those hours, so I was able to get up there while she was being admitted. So, but otherwise, I wouldn't have been allowed. So, in any event, some good news at least through this situation. Anybody else have anything to add?
John Zielinski.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I apologize. I just got out of another telephone webinar meeting. I just wanted to make our members aware of some things going on in the city. Number one, the administration had cut the recycling budget 50%, and there were a lot of layoffs. Consequently, the director of the recycling department has cut the recycling hours and days only 1 day a week on Saturday. As a result of that, I have put it on the agenda of the Stamford Board of Reps Operation Committee, which I vice chair. The matter of that, to have the mayor, director of operations McGrath, and Dan Calori, the director of recycling, to come in to discuss this. We want it open during the week. I have a phone number if anybody wants to take it down. I'll wait a moment. In addition, the mayor wanted to have alternate weeks of 1 week garbage collection, the following week recycling collection, and then alternated. I wanted to put that on the agenda. The mayor was on the line. He said he hasn't made a final decision, so he asked to put it on hold for 1 month, which we did. And I asked the mayor to put it in writing to us before the 30 days is out to let us know if indeed he's going to pursue that course of action. If he is, we will invite him in because it's unacceptable. And finally, I believe the mayor is going to issue a release today saying that starting this Saturday and on weekends, only Stamford residents will be allowed onto our beaches. I'll give you the phone number for the meeting of the Operations Committee meeting, which will be this coming Tuesday, July 28th at 6:30 p.m. To listen in, you will not be able to speak. It is not a public hearing. I will be speaking and fighting for that to go, to have that happen, to increase the days during the week. The number is 1-646-558-8656. You will be asked for the webinar ID number. That is as follows: 942-2765-6885. Thank you, Joe. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer it.
Does anybody have any questions? Raise your blue hand. Okay. All right. With that, guys, like I say, any suggestions for next week, please get in touch with myself, Steve, or Larry Holzman, and we'll go from there. Otherwise, we'll just have an open discussion meeting. Okay, I think with that, wish everybody stay healthy and be careful. We're still in the COVID situation, so don't think because things are abating that it's safe to go out and safe to do things like we did before. We still have to be careful. We're still vulnerable at our ages, and be careful, you know, more careful if you're around young people, teens and young millennials or whatnot, because they seem to think that they're not vulnerable to any of this, but they may not be, but they could be spreading it to others. So, you know, watch yourself, be careful, and enjoy the next week.
Wear your mask. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Steve.